Hey guys, welcome to the Fortified Castle. And ciao, bonjour, hola, guten tag, and privet to my foreign friends. And today we're going to be doing the second installment on how to date your knife. The first one covered tang stamps and some different characteristics that we look at to date knives when you don't have any other means to do that. So markings, patterns, steel, the type of knife it is, construction, the quality of the knife, and the materials involved in the knife are all different kind of things you can look at to help you to date a knife. So today we're going to be just concentrating on markings. And so if you look at this knife right here, you see it is a Robertson Sure Edge, Rochester, New York. And that marking is the maker, Robertson, the brand, Sure Edge, and the city and state. And so if you can call a tank stamp normal, this is kind of normally what they look like. And from there, they start to vary. So it can go all the way down to just a maker or brand being on the knife, or absolutely no tank stamp whatsoever. On the secondary blade on this knife, you'll notice that it's different. Robertson Cutlery Company in the middle. And so this is an older tank stamp on Robertson, but it's not a Frankenstein knife. This is absolutely normal for a Robertson knife to mark the secondary blade. And that's because companies normally marked all the blades on the knife up until the 1920s. And at that time, they start to move to just marking a single blade. So by the 1945, companies are pretty much only marking one blade on the knife. And some companies, like Wollstonehome and Boker Soligen, they continue to mark all the blades to a very late date. So it's really good if you get a knife and it's marked all the blades. It's a good indicator of a early age of the knife. But you got to look at all the clues because none of this stuff is positive. And so next on the agenda here, knives can be marked anywhere on this knife, right? So we're used to the tang stamp being marked, but the blades can be marked. The whole frame can be marked. Bolsters can be marked. The back springs and even the top side of the blades there, or the back of the blades, can be marked. And so if we look at this knife again, one thing that's missing off this knife is USA. And so USA knives as early as 1910 can have USA on it, but it really became common after 1920. So when you see a knife that doesn't have USA on it, it's a good indicator of an early knife. After World War II in 1945, there's a little bit of a lull in putting USA. Some manufacturers did it and some didn't. But in 1965, it became required to be put on all knives. And so you see that now after 1965, USA or Made in USA is on all knives. And so that's a good indicator for you of knives, if that's missing of an earlier knife. Another indicator on knives is country of origin. And so when you look at this knife here, you see it says the manufacturer, I bought in Peace and Company, and Sheffield, but no country. And so this is kind of normal up until 1890 when the United States required the country of origin to be put on a knife. There are some exceptions to this, by the way. but it's a good indicator that the knife was made prior to 1890. Another thing that's a good indicator on knives is knives that say rust-free, inox, no stain. Phrases like that that have to do with stainless steel are post 1914. Why won't that snap in? Or post 1914. In England, they started using stainless steel in 1914, and in United States, 1921. So those are indicators of a knife. The lack of it is an indicator of a knife that's older. Another thing that's common with early knives is hokey names. Okay, so names like Keen Edge, Cutwell, Eversharp, things like that. Um, those are going to predate 1945 generally. Sometimes those things kind of extended up into the 50s, but for the most part, they stopped after World War II, and companies were just using their brand names. So long names like Dwight Devine and Sons, W.R. Case and Sons, Holly Manufacturing Company were used prior to 1920. And around the 20s, as we've said before, companies started going to just Case or Ulster or a single name or a brand name, K-Bar, Cutmaster. And so they're just going to shorter names after 1920. So long names are a good indication of a knife that's pre-1920. Let's look at this Robertson again. So if you look at this tang stamp, it looks kind of modern, right? And that's called a sans serif font, okay? If you look at this knife again, you'll notice it looks different. It looks old, and that's a serif font, and it's characterized by little ticks coming off of the long strokes of the letters, and that's what gives it its distinctive look. And so this serif font was popular in the 1700s up to the 1900s, and in the 20th century, companies were going to that sans serif font. They were going to the font that looked like this. Okay, so it's a good indication of a pre-1900 knife. Like any of the other indications, you can find knives with serif font probably up to the 40s, but most of them I quit using it in the beginning of the 20th century. Okay. Knives that have Prussia on them are going to date pre-1940, 1915. Rhineland is a German name. That's going to be on companies that are about 1920 to 1935. Snap that in. Occupied Japan, 1945 to 1952. And Austria, 1891 to, snap in, 1891 to 1915. So those things could give you a little clue of the ages of the knife. Things like warranty, celebrated, cast steel, English steel are all pre-1891. They were put on knives that were for export to the United States, and it's pretty dateable. Another thing that's dateable on knives is numbers on knives. And so knives that have numbers like from 1 to 24, it's usually no more than a 2-digit number. Those were on different blades, and those numbers mostly were English, but the Germans used those numbers too. And it's kind of rare that you find numbers on United States knives. Um, Torch marks. So torch marks are 4-digit year dates, like 1865, 1776, and those are good indicators of the age of a knife. An example of that are Henry Sears and Sons, 1865. So Henry Sears did not use 1865 in his markings, and that occurred after he sold the company. And so that in and of itself points to the date of the knife. Okay, let's move on to blade stamps. So this is a blade stamp. Let me try to get this in. So this was stamped into the blade at the time of forging, just like a tang stamp. It has depth. If you run your finger over it, you can feel it's deep. They're usually dark and have a black outline because that's caused from doing it after forging. And this was popular in the 17 and 1800s. But around 1860, manufacturers started favoring acid etching. And so you can find these marks up to the 1900s, but they were pretty much, very few were still stamping their blades in the 20th century. I have seen blades up to 1970 or 1980 that were stamped, but it's a really good indication of a pre-1900 knife blade stamping. So this is a best example of etching that I can give you, and I apologize for the rust on this knife, but you can still see the etching on this knife, and it's a spear, and there's a banner around the spear with a bunch of lettering on it, and it's very intricate. And this is why manufacturers went to acid etching. You can just do a whole lot more with it. So this actually started in the early 1800s, but became popular in 1860, and that runs up to about 1830. These etchings like this. Companies still use acid etching today, but this type of etching is indicative of a knife that's pre 1930 at least. Good indication of a knife that runs into the 1800s. So starting in 1830, they have electro etching, and that really becomes prominent in 1840. And if you look at this, it's a pretty crisp image on here. But the thing about electro etching, if you run your finger across it, it's smooth, and you can feel no depth to it. And so they don't really last very long either. And electro etching became popular 1940. They're still doing that today. So a knife that has electro etching isn't going to date any further back than 1940. After electro etching came laser etching, and I'll tell you what. Let me open this back up again for you. So if you look at these two knives, you see the difference. The laser etching is much stronger and more prominent than the electro etching. It's just a better way to do it. And if you run your finger over the laser etching, it has depth to it, so you can feel it, and it's going to last a lot longer. It's usually black as a result of the etching, but they can etch in different colors. So it just has a lot of depth to it. And this started in 1978, but I don't think it really caught on until the 80s. So knives that have this type of etching are probably going to date post 80. Okay, patriotic symbols or slogans. Okay, so this knife is a remake, a very good reproduction of an old famous Edward Barnes dirk, and it's almost exactly like his original dirk. And he stenciled U.S. on his knives. Um, so common from the 1850s probably to the end of the 1860s was these patriotic slogans like liberty and union, death to abolition, and all kinds of different slogans like that. They were mainly put onto Bowie knives, but they were also put on the large folders like this. This is considered a dirk, but hunting knives, large hunting knives, can have these patriotic um, slogans on them. So they're a very good indication of an early, a mid 1800 knife. But as you can see here, they can also be on a reproduction. I don't think you're going to mistake this for an 1860 knife, though. So another thing is military slogans could be on the blade. So remember the Maine. Um, that dates to the Spanish American War, 1898, I want to say. I think that's right. Um, Don't Give Up the Ship, that's the War of 1812. And these were mainly on naval knives, okay? But you can also find them on some larger folders. And U.S. Navy was etched on the knives. This is this pattern is a rope knife, characterized by a broad, blunt blade and a sway back here. Most of them are like that. And this is where you're going to find a U.S. Navy on the knives. This one's from 1944, so it doesn't have the U.S. Navy on it. But they were putting that on knives from the 1800s all the way up probably to 1830. I think the last one I saw was a Miller Brothers knife, and probably dated to the 1920s. And I really don't think they did that in World War II, but there may be out there. It's a good indicator. U.S. Navy on a rope knife is a good indicator that it's an early 1800 knife. Bolsters. Let me see what I got here. Okay, bolsters. You can see here, this is Robertson Cutlery Company. So companies would put their initials or sometimes their whole names, sometimes different things on these bolsters. Not only on Barlow's though. So I've seen Case engraved on the head bolster here, the Case name, and I've also seen bolsters here that had various things written on them. It's pretty rare to see it on a bolster. Um, Rarer still is markings on the back spring, but I have seen markings on the back spring, and I actually have a knife uh, that has writing on the back of the spine of the blade. So you can just find writing everywhere on a knife. We're going to wrap this up pretty quick. Um, when it comes to the whole frame, sometimes knives were marked on the whole frame. So you see corn knife there. It's pretty common to see office knife written on the side of the knife. And other than that, mainly you're going to see advertising on knives. This one dates from 76 to 1980. You can see on the other side. Pretty nice. This one would date between 1940 and 1880, clear celluloid. And here's one. So this is carbon steel cover on this knife. Sam Buckley and Sons. They were actually steel makers, and so this knife is marked with their name on one side, and then you can see Century Tool and Metal Company on the other. So it's an advertising knife, but this knife would easily date between 1910 and 1862. I think it probably dates to 1880, 1890 is what I think. So you can see that advertising on a knife, it really is going to depend on the type of material um, that the cover is, or the scale of the knife. That's really going to indicate the age, because they've been doing it for a long time and they're still doing it today. I wanted to add one more thing. I'm trying to think of what that was. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. If you guys like the video, go ahead and like it. I appreciate that. And if you want to see more content like this, um, go ahead and subscribe. Remember, you'll know the truth. The truth will set you free. And I really appreciate you guys for watching the video. Thanks a lot.